Hello and welcome back to another We Are Sunderland morning briefing. It's a bit of a special edition this episode. We've got highlights from our players, pundits and podcasters evening, which took place at the Sunderland Farm Museum last month. The night in question was to raise money and awareness for men's mental health. If you were there or fancy getting along to the next talk, and we'll be hosting another event at the Farm Museum after the season comes to an end. We sat down with former Sunderland players Kieron, Brady, Martin Scott and David Hodgson as they opened up about their own battle with mental health and the importance of talking about that struggle. Before we revisit the night, if you watch it on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, drop us a like on the video. It's still just £1 to subscribe to We Are Sunderland's website. You can get 6 months worth of coverage for just £1. It goes to £2.99 after that. And if you subscribe now, you can also be in with a chance of winning hospitality tickets for Sunderland's final game of the season against Sheffield Wednesday. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
Spot on, thanks everyone for joining us. Can you hear us all right? Is that all right? Yeah. Good, well, we'll start with yourself, Kieron. Obviously, your journey to Sunderland, how did that come about?
I suppose Sunderland's interest came relatively late in the day. It looked for a long time that my footballing journey would have begun in London with Chelsea. But I'd been invited down here on trial, and after spending some time here and getting to know not only the younger players in particular, but many of the people, it was easy to recognise the common features that existed between people in the northeast of England and the west of Scotland. And of course, London can be quite a daunting prospect for anybody, let alone somebody at such a young age. And I decided that Sunderland would be the best place to continue my football and development, to start my professional or full-time career. And I entered into a YTS as it was then, but I was fortunate that whereas most people signed for 2 years, I had some negotiating powers, as it were, when I came to the table and was able to agree on a 1-year YTS with the possibility of then turning professional. And it was, I think as has just been said, when I was 17 that I played for the first team. I think that was my first game at Roker Park, looks in the picture up there. And despite the fact that I only played for 5 years, I don't have one regret as a human being in terms of coming to this part of the world, because I've said often enough that if there is any place where you could play for just a few short years and your career's effectively over by the time you've just left your teens, then this would be the place to do it, because the people here, the football fans here, have a long memory, and it tends to be full of affection and affinity for those who put on those red and white stripes and they feel performed and were able to produce. So it was late in the day, but it's a wonderful place to come and play football.
Yeah, as you say there, obviously many happy memories, but what does it feel like looking back at that up there?
Well, it's somewhat envious because the person in that picture's got hair. And, so that was back at a time when mullets were relatively fashionable. But I suppose there's an element of surrealism about it because, as I said, and I think it says in the picture, I was only 17. And, Dennis Smith was of the view that I was ready to come and play at that level. And, it's very, very happy memories, despite the fact that I stopped at 21. They're memories that I'll cherish always, because it was a realisation of childhood dreams. And I think in the immediate aftermath of having to retire, there was a period where you are grieving. And my mum's here this evening, and she would have been one to recommend perhaps going and speaking with someone about it. But, that's in many respects what we're here tonight, to encourage people to do. But at that particular time, I didn't go and share my emotional lows with anyone. And it's something I would be very, very prominent in encouraging people to do if the circumstances within their life warrant it. But as I said, it was just a wonderful place to come and play football and to be the recipient of such affinity, and that's something that is sustained for many, many years.
And as you say there, obviously your career was cruelly cut short. It's something that I know yourself, you've been very vocal about in the battle that you've had afterwards. Just for everyone here who isn't aware, if you want to talk us through, you know, what you've experienced since you left the game.
Well, you know, I'm sure some people know that I'm an alcoholic. Now, mercifully, I've been sober now for almost 15 years. But I'm not an alcoholic in the sense that some might be within the culture of celebrity, whether it's footballers, sports persons, actors, musicians, etc. I'm a grade A, 24-carat Champions League alcoholic. And there was no amount of solace or consolation that would come in those dark moments simply because you once played football professionally or you once had thousands of people chanting your name. You know, your urine didn't smell any sweeter on the front of your jeans or in the cupboard that you just pissed in during the night simply because you once played football at a high level. And getting sober, but more importantly, staying sober for that period of time has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. And just to add to that, Matty, I often have the question asked of me, Kieron, do you think you're an alcoholic because your career was cut short at such a young age and your dreams were dashed and the golden and glittering career that many people had envisaged for you was denied? And there may well have been a period in life where you're tempted to answer affirmatively, where self-pity dictates the response. But I believe I've been predisposed to being an alcoholic from the moment I was born. And what life events, particularly traumatic events, can do is dictate when the alcoholic and alcoholism come into collision. And for me, it was in my mid-30s, but I've got absolutely no doubt that even if I had a prolonged career, if it had been successful, if it had offered financial stability for the rest of my life, alcoholism and I would still have came into collision at some point. And when people are disinclined from believing it, you only have to look around and note the celebrities, for example, just to use them. You know, whether it's Paul Gascoigne or whether it's Matthew Perry or whether it's Shane McGowan, people who had so much adulation, affection, and no shortage of financial wealth, but it wasn't enough for them. And I was blessed with the gift of desperation. It wasn't nice, it wasn't particularly pleasant being suicidal 30, 40 or 50 times. But now I can look back on that particular period as not something that simply happened to me, but something that happened for me. And I've now been given the opportunity to help and aid and assist in the recovery of alcoholics around this city. And I've been doing that now for over a decade, and it's something I've hoped to be doing for a long time to come.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Then obviously, as we say, everyone in this room has their own story, and we've obviously just spoken a little bit. As a professional footballer, talk us a little bit about your journey into football.
Well, like any young boy, as soon as you can sort of walk and you sort of got a football and you're kicking about. And back in Sheffield, my dad was a steel worker, really tough man and tough job, and wanted his boys to grow up like that. And I am a tough lad, but it's so when I got into football, I did the grassroots and played for local football teams, and I got an opportunity sort of 14 to sort of train with Rotherham, and it was always a case of he's a real talent, but he's not big enough. So I had to carry that throughout my career of until I actually made it of, well, I'm talented, but I'm not going to grow. And it weren't until I got to sort of 15, 16, and I'll never forget it, I suddenly shot up 6-7 inches. I was wearing jeans, and then the next day the jeans were like shorts. I'm like, my God, I'm massive sort of scenario, and I'm talking 5'1", 5'2" here at 15, and I'm now sort of 5'10". So the difference of, my God, he's grown. We've got a talent, but now he's not 5'1", 5'2". So I started training with Rotherham, and I got into the first team training facility, and it was actually George Kerr, the manager. And Phil Crosby was the left back at the time, and I was the only other left footer at the club. Phil broke his leg on the Saturday. I played the Tuesday as a 16-year-old at Rotherham. And I wouldn't have, it's just I was the only left footer. So I got thrown in the deep end, and I thought, fantastic, I've made it sort of scenario. But as I spoke earlier, then sort of 6 months down the road, I'm thinking I've got a long career in front of me. I had a career-threatening injury at 16 and a half stroke 17. I had to have my pelvic pinned, which was a massive, massive operation at that age. I'd grown too quickly, and playing first-team football at that age, I just weren't coping with it. So I had this massive operation. Was I going to make a career out of football? Was I going to retire at 16, 17? I eventually came through the operation, amazing rehab for 12 months. It really got me into a dark place, training on my own. The facilities were nothing like they are now. So I eventually got back into the first team at 17, did really well at Rotherham. And then I got a sort of sniff to go to Notts Forest on loan when Brian Clough was there, which was a education, to be honest with you. But then I came back and got back in the first team at Rotherham and got transferred to Bristol City, which was a big club. Bristol City was a massive club compared to what Rotherham was back then. Yeah. They weren't a championship club back then, they were Division sort of 3 then. I was ready to move. I was only 18/19 then, so to then leave home, down south, down Bristol, which was, it's 7 miles away. I was ready for it personally, but again, I was going to an environment which was a real tough environment. They'd signed me for big money. It was 200,000 then. It actually saved Rotherham. They actually nearly went bankrupt, but the 200,000 actually kept their heads above water. It was nice to see that the club got saved. But I then had 4 great years at Bristol, and I eventually signed for Sunderland in 1994. But I nearly actually signed for him in 93. Dennis Smith was the manager, and it was I think it was 92, 93 when he got promotion. I think back to the sort of championship. I think it was anyway. And the team he had then, obviously Gabardini, Eric Gates, was a fantastic set of players. And I nearly signed for him because Dennis was interested anyway. It didn't happen, and I signed a year later when Mickey Buxton signed me in 94. And I agree with Kieron. As soon as I came to the North East, I felt at home. Yeah. I just had a real feeling, an affinity with the fans. I came as a £750,000 fullback. They just sold Don Goodman for £1 million, I think, to Wolves. The fans didn't want a left back; they wanted a striker. And I've got to exactly. Totally agree. Yeah. So the pressure on me then, and I didn't cope well with it. Yeah. I really didn't cope well with it. I was still relatively young. I was 23. I was coming to the North East. I didn't even know Sunderland, where Sunderland was. I came and stayed at the hotel on Seaburn Front. I didn't even know there was a beach and a coast. I was that naive. And I stayed that night. It was absolutely freezing cold. It was 23rd of December. I signed the next day, and I think I played on Boxing Day. And I was absolutely useless. And this is how bad it was. I walked into the players' lounge after the game, and there was 2 people I wanted to see. Was my mum and dad. I ain't seen them for weeks. And I walked in and I saw my mum and dad, and I could just tell my dad's face. I know I'd been useless, but I just wanted that reassurance from him. Yeah. And he went,
I think you'd been useless.
Yeah. Oh. And he said, Martin, you were fucking useless. So he reassured me, yeah. So, but that was my dad, and he loves me uncontrollably, but has never ever, and even if he sat here tonight, he's never ever told me he loves me. But that's the way he got brought up, and I don't hold that against him. But we laugh about it now, and I always wind him up if I take him for a pint and stuff. We've got a fantastic relationship, but that's the environment that I got brought up in. But coming to Sunderland, I had 6.5 / 7 years through the sort of Peter Reid, moving from Roker Park to the stadium. and in my opinion, it's probably the best times recently for years. Amazing times, absolutely amazing times. And Peter Reid, Bobby Saxton, and his staff created a real team feeling around the club, and I think the fans bought into that. And it was a great time to play. Tough time. Yeah. I'll never forget the first time I walked into the dressing room. There was a fight. Darren Ferguson and Darius Kabitsi did a few words on the court after the game on the Saturday. I was always first in. Me and Tony Norman. Morning Tony, morning Scotty. We sat there talking. Darren walked in. Darius walked in. Full-scale fight, and I'm like, what's going off here? And I'm sat here and I'm thinking, what's going off? Because the club was struggling. Yeah. They were relegation, I think they were third or fourth bottom. And then all the other players started to come in, and they all started stripping off, and I've never seen so many tattoos in all my life. I don't have tattoos. Kevin Ball is covered in tattoos, Richard Ord, tattoos. Everyone's looking at, and most of them weren't even spelled right, you know what I mean? You're looking at, and I'm thinking, my God, I've signed for a pub team here. And one of the first, Ball, I'm really close friends with Kevin, and one of the first sessions we were running around Charlie Early Centre, and it was blowing a gale, and we ran round for a lap and stood round the back of the dressing rooms and had a quick stretch, and Ball went, first impressions. And I looked at him, he went, come on, tell me honestly. He said, I'm captain. I said, no, you're captain. I said, you were fucking captain Saturday. I went, honest to pit, Kev? He went, yeah. I went, we're going to get relegated. He went, I fucking love that. He went, I like honesty. And that's Kev. Yeah. And he smelt it. And in all fairness to him, he organised a meeting. And a few untruths were told. And a few fingers were pointed. A lot of players weren't having Mickey Buxton. Peter Reid came, I think, early January, February time, and we eventually stayed up. But Kevin drove that. As a captain, he saw the problems. There were a lot of players out of contract. A lot of players didn't like the manager, were looking to get away from the club. But it wouldn't benefit anyone if the club got relegated. Yeah. And it certainly wouldn't benefit me coming from a Bristol City to Sunderland and getting relegated. Anyway, we eventually stayed up, and the rest is history. We got promoted the following season. So my time at Sunderland was amazing. But within that, I have massive regrets because of the injuries I got. I was playing Premiership football at 28, 29, 30, which I was peaking realistically. There was a lot of talk about me getting the next England squad when Kevin Kieron was there. And I'd already been given the nod, you're in the next squad, and then I got injured.
That must have been incredibly tough as well.
Massively tough. And as I spoke to you earlier, I'm the life and soul of parties at times. People wouldn't think that I've gone through depression. And I have. And I still struggle at times now, thinking back at what could have been, what would have been. But listening to Kieron there, it's an eye-opener for me. And one of the major things that's helped me is talking. Yeah. I've done all the online stuff for depression and mental health. I've read every book you can think of. And they do give you little snippets, but actually sitting down and talking to someone, sometimes a total stranger, just releases that tension. And there's always someone worse off than what you are. And like I say, I eventually had to retire at 30, 31, and I didn't cope with it very well. I had two small boys. I'd gone from earning half decent money to literally £50 a week disability, and literally you've got to find a job. Yeah. I had no idea what I was going to do, and luckily I got the opportunity to. I actually nearly signed for Doncaster, who were a non-league club then, yeah. but I couldn't cope with training or playing, so I eventually went into Hartlepool and became a youth team coach, and my career took off from that way. But at times it has come back. You do think, and it's funny what Kieron just said there. He doesn't blame sort of finishing early for his problems he's had, but it certainly affected me. The sort of 5-6 years that I missed. Yeah. Not so much the money. The money's the money was immaterial to me. I'd have played for nothing, but it was going from playing in front of 48,000 fans and getting that real buzz. Training every day, a set routine, and then suddenly coming out of that was a real tough thing to cope with. And like I said, I've never ever turned to drugs. I never took drugs. I've never had a drink problem. My major problem is keeping everything within, and that's from my wife to my parents to my family. And it's only until recently that I've eventually realised you've got to open up. And sometimes I've been sat at home and the phone rings and you look at it, oh, who's on the phone, and it's probably the one person you want to speak to. But when you've got depression and mental health issues, you will not answer that phone. Yeah. The illness makes you not answer that phone. But realistically, you should answer that phone, and you should be talking, and you should be meeting people for coffees, or going for a drink, or going for a walk, because that is the first step of helping your own illnesses and your own issues.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind that as well, can't we? So, thanks very much for listening. And David, obviously, moving on to yourself, local lad from in the northeast. Talk to us a little bit about your journey into how you sort of got...
No, I'm not going to carry on talking there for another 50 minutes. We'll be finished for the night, wouldn't we? Say again with it. Sorry.
So, talk to us a little bit about your journey from local lad in the northeast, coming through at Borough.
Okay, so I started at Reggie Boys Club, which was that time was sort of like a link club to Sunderland. That's only to the Borough. But to be honest with you, I grew up a Sunderland fan from the age of 4, 5. Dick sat in front of me now. Watched the great 73 side, obviously. Colin Todd was my hero as a kid. Always a defender and I'm a striker. But so I was coming to Roca at 5 years of age, season ticket holder by 12. Wagging off school quite regular to get the tickets for different cup games and Man City, etc. So I was a big Sunderland fan. So every Saturday throughout your school days and you finish in your game on Saturday, the first thing I would ask would be a Sunderland scout at the game, and it never ever happened, ever. Nobody ever came from Sunderland Football Club to ask me, Dad, we like your son or whatever. So the thought of ever playing with Sunderland sort of disappeared when I signed for the Borough, obviously. And even when we played against Sunderland in the youth games, Kevin Arnott, Al Brown, Sean Elliott, these lads were all playing, and it was like as if I wanted to be in that side by then, you know. So it was this always thing in the back of my head about Sunderland. So obviously played at the Borough, you get in the side, I go at 17 or 18. Thank God John Neal was there. Thank God Bobby Murdoch was there. Great coach. Knew how to deal with kids without his presence. He asked the question, would you have made it through the apprenticeship stage to become a pro? Sometimes question that because he was such a great guy. John Neal, such a humble person, northeast guy. Would have been a different manager. Big Jack was my original manager, but he left in the first year. And you ask all those questions, if those people hadn't have been there, would they have been the people who would replace them would have given you the belief in yourself to become a pro? Anyway, so the bottom line is I ended up doing very well for the Borough. And then, of course, I got the move to Liverpool, which I didn't want to go, okay? And it wasn't anything other than the fact is that I didn't have any ambitions. When I say that, I wanted to be a football player. Well, you know when you hear people say, oh, I dreamed about playing in a cup final, or I dreamed about playing for England. I didn't have those dreams. It wasn't something that I wanted to be. I played for England. I played in cup finals, but I never dreamt of it. I never ever said to anybody as a kid, oh, one day I pray I play in a cup final. I just didn't have that mentality. So when the move came to go to a club like Liverpool, it didn't mean a great deal to me. It was Liverpool Football Club. They were the biggest team in Europe at that time, probably in world football. But I didn't get this buzz that I've got this chance to go and sign for Liverpool at all. It just wasn't there. Because if I'm happy, and I have to say it, obviously I was extremely happy playing for the Borough, what was Liverpool going to make it any happier for me? It wasn't, in my opinion. Okay, that's just how I am. But the big time when I stopped, or happiness was that I'm at Liverpool Football Club, entered in the second season, had a very, very good season first year, which is not normally the case when you go to Liverpool. You have to go through the reserve system for 2 years. When I got straight in, played exceptionally well, blah, blah, blah. And then the second season, Joe Fagan took over. He brought in Mike Robinson. I won't bore you with all the details about that particular season, but I must have handed in about 20 transfer requests. And I got wind through Mark Proctor that Sunderland wanted me. So Alan Durbin would have been then the manager. That didn't happen. And then Lenny became manager. So my arrival at Sunderland Football Club just would never happen in the modern game. So I'll tell you what happens here. So we played Everton in the Charity Shield on this sad day. I know for a fact that I should have been on that pitch. I don't. I got to see Joe Fagan on the Monday morning, who was then the manager, and said, Gaffer, I've got to leave. You've got to let me go from here. And you son wanted me, okay? So he says to me, where do you want to go? So I want to go home. Obviously fucking kid. He said, home as in Sunderland. Actually, I said, yes, Sunderland's home. I'm going to go home, blah, blah, blah. And he literally says to Sheila, who was his PA, ring Sunderland Football Club, get Dan Ashurst on the phone. So I'm stood in his office. Sheila rings. Sheila asks for Len Ashurst. Len Ashurst comes on the phone, and Joe says, there you go, hands the phone to me. You want to leave the club? You deal with it. So I've got Eddie on the phone. I know he wants me, but I cannot basically say it. He's tapped me. So I said, hi Lenny, it's Dave Hodgson. The gaffer's just handed me the phone. I'm just letting you know I'm going to come to Sunderland Football Club. Lenny sort of froze. He said, oh, you better put Joe back on. So he puts Joe on, and then I go training. Obviously no mobile phones in those days. I get home from training, there's an answer machine on, Joe's on there. Hodgie, this is your gaffer, blah, blah, blah. I want you to go to Sunderland tomorrow. You're meeting Lenny at 9 o'clock. You do not sign until you speak to me. Okay, fine. So my parents lived in Gateshead, or my dad, sorry, my mum passed away. So I come up, stay overnight, but Lenny calls to the pub. He obviously knew where I was staying. I told him at the club, rings and said, I want you at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, no problem. So I'm there at 7. By 7:15, I've signed, agreed. So I ring to Lenny, back to Joe at 9 o'clock. Said, hi, Gaffer, it's Hodgie. He said, right, son, what's happening? I said, I've signed. Went silent for a second. He said, you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. He obviously knew Laurie McVenemy was coming 2 years later, okay? And I didn't know that. Because I'll tell you now, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have freaking signed. So, I said, okay, Gaffer, and he put the phone down. And I know that lads are on about the issues I've had, Kieron, and more here. That tortured me for a long, long, long time. Not there and then at that spot, because I was at Southern now, I didn't give a shit about Liverpool. I'm back where I always wanted to be. Later on in life, when I packed in the 30, but it was my choice as opposed to Adrian. I wore with the football at 30, 31. And when you're away from the ground and you're away from the training facilities and you're away from your teammates and you're a little bit isolated, you do let your mind run over with you. And in this case, it tortured me that this guy, Joe Fagan, turned around and said, you've just made the biggest mistake of your life. And didn't tell me what I'd done or what the mistake was, just left it with me. That tortured me for a long, long time. There's something badly from it later on, which we will obviously go into under the conversation. But so that was my route to Sunderland Football Club. And as I said, unfortunately, along come Laurie, who literally from the second day, had made his decision. He did not like Dave Hodgson. And he didn't like Dave Hodgson because he was because of a footballer. He just didn't like Dave Hodgson, full stop. Okay? And I had a real tough time with this guy for a year. Put me through shit. It's not even normal in football what this particular guy put me through. Okay? And unfortunately, when I signed the contract with Sunderland, I signed for 2 years. I just left Liverpool. Who leaves Liverpool? It might is me, but how many people would leave Liverpool Football Club? And I'll tell you something now, and I mean this. At that time, I was possibly the highest paid player in English football. The lads have probably, I don't know what the lads were on, so I was on £1,000 a week basic, £33,000 a year sign-on fee, and all the other incentives supported. And the reason I know I was the highest paid in the time because Brian Robson signed for Man U and Michael came to Liverpool, and Michael came on £900 a week, and he put his book, he thought he was the highest paid player in football. So I was. I left Liverpool to come home and half my wage for 500 quid. And I know you'll not find many people will walk away from a job and half the wage. You just won't. But I wanted to come back here. That was more than anything else. But as I said, Laurie turned out. And I'd only signed a 2-year deal. I could have signed 4, but I did say to Lenny at the time, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll sign for 2 years. I'll prove my worth to give me the contract that I've just left, which he agreed on. And then, of course, Laurie turned up. So at the end of that second year, I'm gone. But that year in football under him was the worst year of my life. My life, not just a football career, was the worst year of my life under that dad. And I don't think he, later on in life, when I had my struggles, mental issues, I don't think I related back to him. It was more down to Joe's comments and had never known the reason why and made the biggest mistake. But he certainly didn't help me, that's for sure.
Yeah. Thanks very much for opening up and telling us.
Thank you.